This is Conversations on Careers and Professional Life, a podcast from the Foster School of Business, MBA Career Management Office. I'm your host, Gregory Heller. On each episode, I talk with guests from faculty and staff to students, alumni, and business leaders about the skills and strategies that can help you design a professional career that you're happy with. On this episode, I'm joined by Lorraine Rise, founder and CEO of Career UpRising. Lorraine is a seasoned career and executive coach, specializing in guiding mid and late career professionals through pivotal transitions. With a background in federal recruiting and human resources, she brings a wealth of experience to her practice. Lorraine hosts the Career UpRising podcast and also wrote the book, What You Didn't Learn in School: Lessons on Growth, Change, and Living Your Best Life. In our conversation, we'll talk about networking, values-driven job searches, advice for veterans and government employees transitioning to the private sector, and the best ways to use AI technology and tools in the modern career search. Whether you're early in your career or navigating a significant mid-career transition, this episode offers valuable insights to help you move forward with confidence. I hope you enjoy this conversation on careers and professional life with Lorraine Rise. Lorraine, welcome to Conversations on Careers and Professional Life.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here. And I'm really just excited to talk to your audience today, share some wisdom, some stories, some insights. So thank you for having me.
Could you start by telling us just a little bit about how you got into the business and practice of career coaching?
Yeah, absolutely. It's certainly not something that I originally set out to do. It's something that I more found and just, or maybe it found me. But I actually started my career in retail management. Honestly, right out of college, I was still working retail for a couple of years, trying to figure out exactly what I was going to do next. I had originally gotten my bachelor's degree in nutrition, but very quickly decided that was actually not the career path for me. That was more of a personal interest, not actually something I wanted to make a career out of. So I had to pivot immediately after graduating. And I think a lot of people could probably relate to that. Sometimes a lot of us don't end up using our bachelor's degrees as our actual career. And I'm definitely one of those people. So I did go into wellness. I worked for Jenny Craig for almost 6 years. I worked my way up, became a director and a regional trainer, and I thought maybe I would even make my career there. But what happened, I ended up getting laid off, so that didn't happen. So life had other plans for me, certainly. But what I discovered that led me eventually to coaching was when I really thought about what I loved most about what I was doing, and I isolated the parts of my work there in those 6 years that I loved the most. It was coaching, training, and developing, hiring my employees. I loved my staff. I loved seeing them grow, get promoted. I had several who started in entry-level hourly positions and ended up becoming directors and managing their own centers. And that was really gratifying. And I thought, okay, I'm onto something. How can I make a career out of this? Well, I didn't go into coaching right away. That just led me into human resources and recruiting because I loved the hiring process. I loved extending job offers. I loved onboarding people, training them. So that was just the next step in my journey. And after a couple of years in human resources, which I did enjoy, but there were still a few things in there where I thought, okay, I don't know if this is the long-term career path for me. Maybe this is a stepping stone, still figuring it out. But fast forward a couple of years to another layoff. I've had many in my career, many. Um, and in 2015, I just decided, you know what? I'm going to go out on my own. I'm going to take this love of coaching and hiring and helping people in their careers, and I'm going to make a career out of it. And I started Career Uprising, and it allowed me to meet my needs personally as well, in terms of having a young daughter at the time who was getting off the bus at 3 o'clock, and I wanted to be here for that. So it allowed me to have flexibility, work from home, but also hone in on this coaching piece that I found that I loved throughout my career. So I had always been coaching people. I didn't have that title, but I really just looked back at my career and what I loved the most, and that was the piece of it. So I ended up making a job out of it for myself with Career Uprising. And
I,
we're actually celebrating 10 years in business right now, this month as we record.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I love that you looked at what you love doing in a job. It's like recognizing that a job is there are many aspects to any job that a person has, and you can sometimes disentangle the things you really like about that job or about working in that field or that organization from the things you don't like, and you can carry those things you like forward into the next thing that you do. There's this process of discernment, of really thinking about, what you liked and what you are good at, and then doubling down on that, sort of at these two stages, at these pivots that led you into this role. So now you work typically with mid-career professionals. I think you specialize in people that are around our age. We'll call it mid-40s, maybe. Uh, how do you find for that demographic, how do you find the job search different than, let's say, younger entry-level or early career professionals?
Yeah, there's a couple of things that are unique to that group, and I think the biggest thing is, when you get to that midlife stage, and that what that means is different for everyone. Is it 40? Is it 50? It's somewhere in there. Um, but when you get to that stage, one thing I find in common with a lot of people is this point of reevaluating, self-assessment, looking back on your career and going, okay, I've been doing this for the last 15 years. Do I even like it? Do I wanna keep doing it? So I think that there's this piece around meaning, purpose, finding your core values that people in the midlife stage are more tuned into for the most part. For example, and it doesn't that's not to say every young person out there isn't thinking about any of those things. But generally speaking, sometimes, and I know this was absolutely true for myself, in my 20s, let me tell you what my priorities were. And I'm being really honest. It was a title, it was getting out of retail and just getting into Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, have my own office, nice big office building. It was very surface level for me. And I find for myself and a lot of clients, those things that were our priorities before are not necessarily our priorities now. There's a lot of people at the mid-career and late career stage that say, "I really care what company I work for." It's not just about, "Oh, I'm just looking for a job doing this." No, I want values alignment, I want meaning, I want fulfillment. They've maybe been in a career that for a long time that just paid the bills because that was what they need. But now they wanna do something that they love, right? So everyone's goals are a little bit different, but I do find that people at that stage are really hungry for culture, values alignment, and really fulfillment and purpose in their work. It goes a little bit deeper, basically, in terms of what they're looking for.
I think it's also encouraging that at least the polling would show that younger generations, millennials and Gen Z, Zennials, the ones in between, are putting more of an emphasis on finding that that
Yeah.
values fit with their employer. So I'd love to hear a little bit about how you help your clients in a values-based search. What's the process of helping them actually identify their values and then determining what the right companies and roles they should be going after are based upon those values?
Yeah, it's a values are kind of a squishy thing, right? They're not real tangible and concrete. They don't feel that way. So a lot of people struggle to know, well, how am I going to know what they are? It's not
Yeah,
something.
usually it's like when
Yeah,
you're
what they're not.
contradicting them, right?
Yeah. So it's not this scientific process, but what I will do say to clients, there's a lot of asking questions of yourself and doing a deep analysis. So, for example, it actually kind of goes back to what I was just saying about how I looked at the work I was doing and asked myself the question, what do I love most about this? Or what would I get rid of if I could? Because I just don't like that part of the job, whatever it is. And then asking yourself why and understanding there's probably a core value behind that. So, for example, I have identified one of my core values as communication. And the reason I arrived at that conclusion is because I started noticing how much it irks me when people don't communicate well or don't communicate at all. Maybe they take a long time to reply to emails or never do, or maybe they don't give enough information in their explanations or anything like that, right? When I get in a situation where I'm having a hard time communicating with somebody, it frustrates me, right? So I stop, notice that, and go, I wonder if that means that communication is something that I really value. And the more I thought about that, the more I realized how true that was. So your values can be found by what you love and enjoy, because that's probably a values alignment. But it can also be found by what bothers you and what you don't like. And that's values disalignment, right? Or maybe a
Hmm.
conflict of values. Either way, it's giving you clues to your values. So, what you do with that information and is say, okay, I think that whatever it is, creativity, integrity, communication is a value of mine. What do I do with that information now? Now I'm going to start looking for evidence of that in the next company that I interview with. And I'm going to start formulating questions to ask them that give me evidence of those values. So you start strategically focusing on those things, asking questions, and looking for evidence of them in the interview process. So, for example, if for me, if communication is really important to me, I'm going to pay attention to how that new employer communicates with me in the interview process. Do they give me a realistic preview of the job? Are they happy to answer all of my questions? Are they prompt in their responses? How do they treat me and how do they communicate? Because that's going to give me clues as to how it's going to be to work there and whether or not there might be some values alignment. So that's just one example, but it really comes down to observing yourself and then asking why. What is it about that that I like or don't like? And could there be a value behind that?
One of the tools that we use with our students is the Clifton Strengths Assessment. And we find that it helps students put some language around, what their talents are, obviously, what they do best, but also this idea, and I used the word before, of discernment, of understanding the kind of environment where they will really be able to flourish because there is that alignment with their talent themes and with the strengths that they've developed and want to develop. And I know for myself, it's been eye-opening just to have that language and have that report. And as a Gallup certified strengths coach, understand how to use it and work with students. And I've had the occasion to say to a student, looking at the report and talking to them, and they're like, yeah, this internship was really uncomfortable. And I'm like, well, what was it about it that was uncomfortable? And they say, well, we would have these meetings and everyone would be up on the whiteboard. And I just felt like I couldn't really participate. And I'd look at their strengths profile and it would say that they were, high in intellection and, they were a high relator. So they wanted to do some of that thinking work on their own. And they wanted to work only with people they had really strong, trusting relationships with. And when they were thrust into a room with a bunch of people that they hadn't had the time to build those relationships with, and everyone's thinking out loud, it became really uncomfortable for them.
Mhm.
So we use those insights to identify corporate cultures and work environments that may be more suited to a person's strengths. And then on the values front, also, a lot of times what comes up with our students is the idea of service or environmental sustainability, corporate social responsibility. And we really talk about, what is really important to them and use that to help identify companies that are maybe capital V values aligned as well.
Yes, absolutely. And I would say to if anyone's having trouble, identifying these, as you suggested, using an assessment is an excellent way to point you in the direction of your values. I use DISC assessment. I've taken the Strength Finders as well. I think Harmony was one of my number one because I don't
Yeah.
like conflict. So that, it's a very, very eye opening, and I like to use this as well. So I would recommend that as well for anyone who needs a little bit of guidance and needs a starting point to know what their values may be.
Yeah, it's funny you bring up Harmony because I'll be doing some mock interviews with a student and I'll ask them, tell me about a time you had to handle a conflict at work. And they'll be like, I've never had a conflict at work.
Mhm.
And I look at their strengths profile and it's, Harmony is one or two. And I'm like, okay, so let's talk about how you prevent conflict from happening because of your Harmony. So,
Yes, yes.
we use that. So maybe following on this idea of values alignment, you're located in the greater Washington, D.C. metro area.
Yeah.
I believe you have a lot of government clients and you've been doing these Friday LinkedIn Lives, working with federal
Yeah.
employees who maybe have been laid off summarily over the last few months. How do you help clients or individuals who maybe are not a full-on client of yours signed up, think about transitioning from what is a very meaningful values service-oriented role in government into the private sector?
Yeah, it's a big, big shift. Absolutely. And yes, so I'm here outside Washington D.C., but lived here in Northern Virginia my whole life. So that's my backyard, right? All of that national news is my local news. So that's federal contracting and federal work is a big, big industry here. So yeah, and as somebody who's done recruiting in the government contracting space too, I feel like I've always had one foot in both worlds, public and private, and they're really, really different. They really are. So it's a major cultural shift to go from the government, especially if you've been there your whole career, and move into the private sector. And I do have clients right now who are doing exactly that. So there's a whole lot we could unpack. This is probably a whole podcast, but I would say the first thing is addressing the mindset shift, because there is this idea of, it's very mission focused. It's all about the team in the government world. It's not so much about right? It's about the customer and it's about the mission. So I think a lot of those clients have a hard time moving to more of a me focus, where here's what I did and here's my accomplishments, because that's what the private sector is about. Not that we don't work on teams or have a collective mission, but you will be expected in interviews to talk about your personal contribution and what results you brought to the business. So the first thing I do with those clients is we work through getting comfortable with that and understanding that it's expected and it's okay. And that's the private sector is just focusing on a different aspect of it. It is a little bit more performance oriented and individualistic, I think, in that sense. So that's the first thing we do. Then, of course, we walk through trying to identify, what their private sector equivalent role is and what that is called. I'm using a lot of AI tools with clients as well to help them do some research, figure out what their skill gaps are, what their targeted job titles are. So, first there's this piece of mindset, cultural shift, and just make sure that they have the right expectations going into this change. Then, of course, it's moving into the tactical piece of, all right, what is your job title and level actually called? And how can we get you into the hidden job market and start aligning you and networking you with people who are in the private sector in that industry that you want to be in. So that's really, really high level. We could probably do a whole show on how to make a federal to private sector transition, but you have to recognize that different things are, speaking of values, different things are valued in one world versus the other. So you're going to talk maybe about different things in the interview process and just go through a different process interviewing than you in the private sector than you would in the federal world.
Yeah, we work with veterans here who are transitioning out of military service and working to move into the private sector. So again, most of them have not had any private sector experience as a professional. and in most cases have not had to interview because
Yeah.
of the way things work in the military service. So we do a lot of that helping with the translation of titles and also, disentangling the personal contribution from the team contribution. So it's something that is absolutely important. And we also see it with some of the more junior private sector folks who have had a couple years experience, but, still often talk in terms of what the team did.
Yeah.
And when you get into that interview, it really is important to be able to articulate the value that you brought, the difference that you made by being in that role over someone else.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's not always easy to do, but you have to really get comfortable with that and understand that they just want to know what your contribution to it was. It's not that you're taking credit for anything you didn't do. It's just a different angle.
Yeah. So you mentioned the hidden job market. This is something we talk a lot about. There's surveys will say that 80% of jobs are actually in the hidden job market. They already have a preferred candidate before they're even listed. What are some of the tactics that you teach and coach your clients on to begin to build out their network and identify those opportunities?
Mhm. Yeah, it's that I would have to say that's one of the biggest, changes too, I think, going from federal to private sector is just how you find jobs, right? There's no one stop shop, USA Jobs, where everything's transparent and posted, right? It really is a hidden job market. Now there are job postings out there, but, um, a lot of them are not out there, right? And a lot of that is just those are just the employers that chose to pay for those postings. There's many ways that they can find candidates. A job posting is only one. So if we limit ourselves to that, we're really limited in our search. But kind of like I was saying with the values, if something isn't clear and visible and tangible, it's hard to reach out and touch it and find it, right? So people get very intimidated by this concept of the hidden job market because it's hidden, right? It's harder to
Hmm.
find. So, but there are specific strategies that you can do to help you broaden up and open up more opportunities beyond what your eyes and your physical senses can see on the job board. And who knows what that real number is? It probably is 80. That's the prevailing theory out there. I don't think anyone really has a hard number, but we know a lot of job opportunities are out there that are not published. We know that as a fact. So it's always worthwhile to be, in addition to applying online, you can keep doing that, but just don't let that be the only thing you do. So,
I'll share a quick example here. I
yeah.
saw a friend and former colleague post that he was hiring for a software developer role. And within 2 days, I saw him comment on that post on LinkedIn saying he'd had over 1,000
Oh, yeah.
applications. And hey, he said, hey, if you know me, make sure you send me a DM so that we flag your resume and application
Yeah.
appropriately. So
Yeah.
even for the jobs that are listed that you are applying for, the hidden job market or the network, those connections into the company are important because so many of these jobs are just getting inundated with applications, not only because lots of people are looking, but also, as I'm sure we'll talk about before the end of our conversation, technology is making it easier for people to apply to jobs. So individual job seekers are applying to more jobs.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So, yeah, that's interesting. I mean, now with the basics of, for example, networking never goes out of style. That will always be a smart method. So, essentially, I would say at a really high level, there's four components to a job search that I coach clients on. So I can kind of give a broad overview. Then again, there's a lot you unpack within
Yeah,
each
let's do
one,
it.
but essentially there's 4 things we're gonna do. One, of course, we all already know, which is applying to job postings online, and that's okay, but that's only one strategy. So targeting I call that targeting jobs, all right? We can also target people. So one of the first things that I do is tell clients, "I want a list of your top 15 to 20 connections. Who are the people that will pick up the phone? They know you know them. They're the low-hanging fruit in your network. Let's start with them. We don't stop with them. We expand out into second degree and kind of weak ties as well. But that's a starting point. So targeting people is the second way. Targeting companies is the third. A lot of people don't think about doing cold outreach to companies that they are interested in. For example, if you worked at, a pharmaceutical company before and you plan to stay in that industry, well, who are their competitors? Who are some of the vendors that you worked with? Who are all the other companies that you touched in your work with them? Think about them. They're kind of adjacent to you, right? So some people will have companies that are maybe a dream company or a top competitor in their industry or maybe a major employer in their local area. Absolutely. You can approach them. You can make connections at that company and network your way in. So you can target jobs, you can target people in your network, you can target companies that you want to work for. And then you can also work on just visibility and what I call thought leadership. This is one that really gets ignored, right? A lot of people don't see the connection between things like posting thoughtful posts and articles and commenting on LinkedIn as part of a job search strategy, but it is. Increasing your visibility and in conversations and connections on that platform, it's part of a kind of a compounding effect, like the sum of the parts, really. It's a strategy that I teach my clients, especially if they're more of a leader in their industry. I tell them, I want you posting. I want you putting thoughtful, original content on LinkedIn that is relevant to your industry and start conversations. Don't just be a consumer, be a creator. Put information out there and have a point of view and drum up some conversations yourself. Now, that makes a lot of people uncomfortable.
I love
Really
uh,
don't want to do that, but some love it.
I love that you talk about this step 4 because I bring this up with my students who, again, they think, well, what do I have to offer? I'm just a student here. I'm an
Yeah.
MBA. I'm like, yeah, and you're learning all these great things and you have time to research and you're talking to people across companies in this industry. You can synthesize what you're hearing and you
Yeah,
can turn it into an article and then
absolutely.
people will interact with you. And when you meet someone or you reach out to someone and then they look at your LinkedIn profile, they see that you're active and you're engaged and you have more credibility than the person who hasn't posted anything in a year.
Yes.
And I've had other guests on the show. Alexandra Samuel talked about this strategy. Jeremy Schiefling has talked about this strategy. Um, Portia Obang talked about this strategy. I think it's one of these things that people who are coaches, who are content creators, uh, recognize the value of, and sort of the average job seeker doesn't necessarily see that value.
Yeah.
But it is so important. So I love that you bring that up.
Hmm.
I love the idea of targeting companies and looking for those adjacencies, your clients, competitors, if you're staying in the same industry, vendors, et cetera. But let's get back to the targeting people,
Sure.
because this is one where I know you've written about this and we've seen this issue, and I think it has been compounded since the pandemic a little bit, is this difference between real deep relationship building and sort of transactional networking.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about that and how you help your clients understand and build towards a more relational networking strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the word I hear the most is awkward, right? Networking is so awkward for me. So we have to dissect that a little bit and say why? Why is it awkward? It is almost always because they are too transactional in their approach and they are asking people for something, right? Because it's really awkward to approach somebody in your network and just ask them, oh, do you have any job leads? Can you hire me? Can you, that kind of thing. Of course, that would be awkward. So it's usually awkward just because of the way that we're approaching it and how we're showing up for it. So it's a mindset, really. But it's easier said than done to shift that, but that's really all we need. I like to view networking as making friends, as just meeting new people. But even that, for some people, is inherently awkward. If they're a little bit more introverted, may never be a really comfortable thing for them. So If somebody has a lot of, maybe if they're really introverted or for whatever reason, they just have a lot of aversion to this, we just start really small and we start with the low hanging fruit and we kind of flex the muscle a little bit on maybe people in their network that they're more comfortable with. And I have a little bit of a framework that I teach clients to help reduce the level of awkwardness. And it's called AIR, Advice, Insights, and Recommendations. Meaning, instead of, just asking people right off the bat, "I'm looking for a job, can you help me?" Because that's such a vague question, "Help you how?" Um, what I do is I coach clients to use that AIR framework to have more focused questions that are low pressure, conversational, and just get a conversation going. So, for example, ask people for advice. What advice do you have for me in this job search? It could be anything, right? Or what insights do you have about the pharmaceutical industry? I know you have a lot of experience in that field. What trends are you seeing? Or maybe do you have any recommendations for great companies to target? Have you heard any good things about any of these companies or any companies even to stay away from, right? That don't have a good culture. Just asking them for simple advice, insights, recommendations, whether it's about a company, an industry, or just on the job search in general. Those are easy, low pressure ways to engage your network in your job search without putting too much pressure on them to actually go do something for you. Just providing support or just providing information is helpful and it opens the door for them to help you more as well. I think a lot of times people want to help, but they don't know how. And maybe they don't immediately have a way to hire you, but that's not the only way that people can help you in your job search. But a lot of times it's awkward because we make that the only thing that we want from
Yeah.
people. But if we take a step back, slow the process down, and I know that's really hard to do when you're unemployed because you want immediate results. But the more you put pressure on it for immediate results, the worse it's going to be and it's not going to work. So it's a little bit not intuitive in that sense. It's kind of the opposite of what you think. But if you use that framework, and I provide my coaching clients with lots of examples of questions within each one of those, it really eases it up a lot. And just you're meeting the people, you're asking for advice and support and help. You're not asking them to hire you directly or connect you to your boss or anything. I mean, maybe eventually, but we're gonna slow it down and build a relationship first, where if it is not already built.
And it gives you a built-in follow-up
Yes.
because
Yeah.
if you get a piece of advice or a recommendation and you follow through on that, you can circle back to the person who gave it to you and you can tell them what happened and you can thank them for it. And it
Excellent
makes
point.
people feel great.
Yes, absolutely. People want to help, they want to be needed, and they love to give advice. So lean into that a little bit, leverage that. And yes, as you brilliantly said, follow up with these people, let them know that you acted on their advice. They will appreciate that and it will keep the conversation going.
And I would actually say it's critically important to,
Yes.
because if they don't know whether you followed through on anything that they told you about, they're kind of less likely to do it again in the future. If you give them that feedback that, you followed through, you read the book, you listened to the podcast, it was really interesting, here are my thoughts. I talked to this person who you told me to reach out to, or I looked at this company and I found an interesting role. It gives them this good feeling that reinforces the behavior. So they'll be more likely to help you in the future or even help other people.
100%. And I always tell people to focus on being a giver. I know it's hard when you're in a job search and you're kind of in take. What can other people do for me? But the best networking focuses also on giving, always asking the other person, saying, "You've been so helpful. I really appreciate the advice that you gave me. What can I do for you? What are you working on? What do you need support with? I'd love to be able to do something for you as well." People will love that and appreciate that. And that also makes them want to keep talking to you as well because
Yeah.
it's a two-way street. So that and then that gives more reasons for follow-up as well.
So this works, as you were talking about, if you start with those maybe 15 people who would pick up the phone for you, people you have connection with, you worked with in the past, or from school or something like that. How do you advise clients to prospect and connect with new connections to expand their network beyond, especially if they're considering a pivot into a new industry or role? What are some of the techniques and best practices there that you recommend?
Absolutely. So this is where your current network can also help you. When you feel like you have at least a rapport or initial relationship with someone, it is absolutely okay to ask them for introductions to other people. But just ask them, so I see that you're connected to so and so. How well do you know them? Is that somebody you'd be comfortable introducing me to? Because I'd really like to get to know them or something like that, right? So asking permission first, but absolutely go through and see who is a second degree connection. So we already have some person in common, and always work through the person that you know first, because you never want to assume what their relationship is just because they look like they're connected on LinkedIn. So just asking for permission and leveraging the people that are your second degree connections. Or sometimes I call them weak ties. But I think it's really important to do that because we don't, like you said, we don't want to stay in this bubble of just our immediate network. There might not be a job opportunity in your immediate network. But the cool thing about the second degree connections, they're the ones I probably love the most because they are a bridge to everybody else outside of your network. So leveraging those connections is really, really crucial. But we can also go cold. I know this freaks a lot of people out, but it's not that weird. I've had people reach out to me all the time that I don't know. And I may say yes or no, depending on what it is. But you can make new connections, but just be upfront about what it is. Say, hey, I'm on a mission to connect with more professionals in the IT field. I see you have a lot of experience there. Are you open to just getting to know each other? I'd love to get your insights and your experiences as someone who's already been in the industry, right? And not everybody's going to say yes, and that's okay. We're not shooting for 100% response rate. So be okay with not everybody responding when it's cold. It doesn't mean you did anything wrong. It just means they're not interested in that kind of conversation, or maybe it's not relevant. That's okay. Don't take it personally. But I would focus on those second degree connections and see if you can get some introductions and let them know why. You're trying to build out your network in this area, or you're trying to connect with people who have this kind of experience. Just be transparent about what you're looking for and why you want to connect. And I think it will make sense to people.
I think that's an important thing to share. I coach my students to do this. I say, if you want me to introduce you to someone, obviously I have a relationship already with the students where that's what I'm not going to say paid to do, but, that's a big part of it. I say, just write me a blurb. Don't say, hey, can you introduce me to Lorraine? And then I have to ask, why do you want to be introduced to Lorraine? I say, send me the email and say, here's why I'd like to be introduced to Lorraine, give a couple reasons, and then I can basically just make that introduction, or
Yeah.
a permission-based introduction where I ask you if you're open to it and here's why, rather than there having to be a back and forth where balls are more likely to get dropped and things are more likely to get delayed.
Yeah.
But it is really important, and I just want to sort of double click on it, that you want to build the rapport with the intermediary first before you just outright ask them for the connection, because then you run the risk of sliding back into this very uh, transactional networking
Mhm. Mhm.
mindset.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So before we wrap up here, I do want to talk a little bit about technology, because obviously we are in the middle of a technology revolution here with generative AI tools. They're both upending the labor market, but also changing the way people prepare for a job search, conduct a job search. What are some of the ways that you're seeing these tools, and which tools, be used effectively in your practice and with your clients?
Yes, with all of our coaching clients, we always have a conversation now about AI, which is so funny because just a few short years ago, that was not in the conversation at all. Things have changed so much. So, yes, there is a lot that AI can do for us in a job search, but we do need to be strategic about how we're using it because I don't think it's great for every single purpose, right? One of the best uses that I think it is for is research. And one of my favorite tools is actually Perplexity. I use ChatGPT a lot. I think that's really good. I like Perplexity for research. So that could be company research. Maybe you are prepping for interviews and you want to know everything you can about that company. Perplexity is a great place to go. What I like about it is that I think the modeling and the like the do kind of the conversations and the language that it's built on, it's meant a little bit more for doing deep dive research into a certain topic, but it also has a lot of follow-up questions. So after you give it a prompt and it gives you an answer, it has a lot of really intelligent follow-up questions to help you dive deeper into your research. And I really like that feature. So I work with clients on how to use Perplexity to do company research, but also career path research. So if you're going from selling a technological tool, software to medical devices, you need to do a little bit of research about that industry and what are the trends and what are the skills needed. We don't know what we don't know, right? So I use it for that kind of research as well. And, even I actually, just as a real life example, I have a federal client who's transitioning to the private sector. I said, I want you to use Perplexity and ask it, what are the private sector equivalents to the software tools that you were using? He was doing like financial analysis and using a lot of government systems. I said, you need to know what the private sector is using. What kind of tools and software are they using? So ask it, right? And then you can figure out where you have a skill gap and what need to go learn. You need to be aware of these tools. So you can also use it to fill a skill gap as well and say, what do I need to know when I'm making this transition from this to that? And it's really just a starting point. From there, you need to dig a little deeper, maybe do your own research, but it gives you a lot of guidance and direction to kind of fill in the blanks and get you going in the right direction. So I would say research is the biggest thing. What I probably wouldn't use it for is actually writing your resume or your LinkedIn. I think you can use it to augment that process, but I also wouldn't use it to just craft word for word your LinkedIn messages to recruiters or anything like that. I really, really can tell when it sounds robotic or just doesn't sound like that person, like, the
Yeah,
person doesn't
absolutely.
email messages or something. So I think that AI is good as an editor with writing, but probably not writing the whole thing. So some things to use it for, some things not.
Yeah, I think you're right there. You don't want to just cut and paste output from any of these Gen AI tools into your application materials. And especially because a lot of people are doing that. So if you're writing a cover letter and you take the job description and you put it into ChatGPT and you say, write me a cover letter for this, it's going to look like all the other cover letters that every other candidate
Yeah.
use ChatGPT to write.
Yeah.
There are some ways that you can really train it on things that you've written so that it writes more in your style,
Yeah.
but there still has to be, the quote unquote human in the loop working on these materials. So, you might use it to make something shorter or make something more impactful or to
Yeah.
find,
Proofread or something like
yeah,
that. Yeah.
keyword gaps,
Yeah.
where you are not using keywords that are in the job description on your resume. And there's some specific purpose-built tools for that as well. But yeah, it's sort of be cautious, understand how these things work. You don't want to be like the lawyer who submitted the brief citing, fake case law, and then got reprimanded by the judge. You don't want to be in that position in your application materials.
Absolutely. So a combination of human and AI is absolutely the sweet spot. Yes.
I do love the research technique, though, where you can ask, what are 10 other companies that work in the same industry as
Yes.
this company?
Yeah, have it
And
help you develop your target list. Give it your
yeah,
criteria and have it
exactly.
do the research for you. Absolutely, and I
Yeah.
think that that's also really good, especially for I've had a lot of clients who wanna work at startups. Well, startups, a lot of are unknown, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Hmm.
they're emerging. You don't know the name of the startup that you might want. So, that's a really good tool to uncover companies that are emerging that are not on gonna be on your radar that you never would have heard of. So I think it's really good for opportunities like that.
Well, I'm sure we could nerd out on this
That's fun.
for as much time as we've already been talking, but I want to respect your time and wrap things up. I would love for you to share with my listeners where they can find out more about you, where they can see what you're writing and what you're
Yeah,
sharing on your
thank
podcast.
you. Yeah, the website is careeruprising.com. Right there on the website, you can also listen to my podcast, which is also titled Career Uprising. I keep my branding pretty consistent. So I do have my own show. It's on Apple, Spotify, all the major outlets, but you can also listen right there on the website as well, without any kind of account or anything like that. As far as social media, LinkedIn is where I have the greatest presence by far. I have a group there. I have a personal page, company page. I would say the personal page for the most part. If anyone wants to directly connect with me, please, I welcome it. Just send me a little note that or listen to the show. Happy to connect with you. I put a lot of free content out on LinkedIn daily, and I have a newsletter called Get Hired Over 40 that you can subscribe to if you want long form articles on LinkedIn as well.
Great. And I'll put links to all of those in the show notes, which can be found at conversationsoncareers.com. Lorraine, thank you so much for having this conversation on careers and professional life.
Thank you for having me. Absolutely.
This was a great conversation with Lorraine, and as I said, we probably could have gone on a lot longer. But here are 3 key takeaways from our conversation. Reframing networking as a relationship-building activity. Lorraine emphasized shifting our perspective on networking from one that's transactional to one that's relational. Building genuine connections can open doors to opportunities in the hidden job market that aren't advertised publicly and improve your chances with those that are. Second, leverage AI tools wisely. We discussed using AI tools like Perplexity for company research, allowing job seekers to uncover insights about potential employers or build a list of potential targets. Lorraine and I agree that it is best to use AI to enhance and edit your application materials, ensuring they reflect your authentic voice rather than relying on AI to create them from scratch. Last, values-driven job searches. Lorraine highlighted the significance of aligning your job search with your personal values. Understanding what matters most to you can lead to more fulfilling career choices and better workplace culture fits. For more insights from Lorraine, visit Career Uprising or connect with her on LinkedIn. Thank you for listening to Conversations on Careers and Professional Life. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider sharing it with a friend or classmate. Help others find the show by leaving a rating or review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Conversations on Careers and Professional Life is produced by me, Gregory Heller, with support from the Foster School of Business Office of MBA Career Management. Learn more about the show, find show notes and past episodes, and get in touch with me at conversationsoncareers.com.